After my son's shocking text, I discovered an incredible journey to healing. As the rain beat rhythmically against the window, Jane's fingers trembled against her phone, numb from a 12-hour shift. The silence of her small kitchen wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. In that solitude, she opened Jake's text, "We need space." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. How could the bond they shared unravel so quickly? Questions flooded her mind. Hadn't she given him everything? Late nights spent studying, weekends sacrificed for extra shifts, every dollar saved to send him off to college in pursuit of a dream she thought they both shared. Rejection twisted in her chest, a bitter reminder of her inadequacies. Jane leaned against the counter, overwhelmed. This wasn't just a text, it was a barricade, an invisible wall that erected itself between them. Living alone in a town that felt stifling, she couldn't shake the feeling that a better life was always just out of reach, a weight she increasingly felt she bore alone. Was it her relentless ambition that pulled Jake away? The fantasies of a perfect life she painted in her mind felt like a cruel joke. She inhaled deeply, wishing desperately for answers as she replayed their previous conversations, searching for the moment when everything began to shift. Determined yet hollow, she sought counsel from Mrs. Thompson, her high school art teacher, who had kindled a spark of creativity in her soul long ago. Arranging to meet was a step towards rediscovering herself, yet sitting across from the woman who once inspired her was daunting. In her comforting presence, Mrs. Thompson's voice guided Jane through the recesses of her thoughts. "It's essential to understand yourself first, Jane. Only then can you truly understand Jake." Each brushstroke unleashed emotions she hadn't acknowledged. The colors muddled on the canvas transformed into this visceral portrayal of motherhood, one filled with a desire for connection and fear of losing her son to a world of expectations she couldn't control. But just as she began to inhale the fresh air of self-realization, a family secret surfaced. Jake had been silently buckling under the pressure, a pressure shaped by her own ideals and societal norms, a desire for independence that built a barrier she hadn't recognized until it felt too late. The guilt washed over her like a tidal wave. Had she stifled his individuality with her dreams? A suffocating thought wrapped itself around her, tightly constricting. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The cafe was quiet, the air thick with unspoken words, as Jane clutched her coffee, the heat barely reaching her numbed fingers. Would she even recognize Jake if he walked in? Their shared history felt like a tattered quilt, with threads frayed and pulled. The weight of their unresolved issues pressed down harder, and when she finally caught a glimpse of him bustling through the door, anxiety spiked in her chest. Would he scorn her for trying to find him, or welcome her search for understanding? With heart racing, she knew this was the moment she'd either reach out or lose him for good. The gap was there, palpable, charged with emotions yet unnamed. The stakes had never felt so high. Would she manage to bridge this divide, reaching for a connection that felt painfully out of reach? Or had they both already moved too far apart? This truth tugged at her, a storm brewing in her mind, leaving her teetering on the brink of despair. Would she lose him forever? Time seemed to stand still as hope and fear intertwined, leaving Jane in a precarious space where vulnerability became her only option. The moment Jake stepped into the cafe, the familiar contours of his face felt foreign to Jane. The boy she knew, the boy who once laughed over pancakes and raced her to the car for school, seemed dimmed, the light in his eyes shadowed by something she couldn't quite grasp. He hesitated just inside the door, scanning the room, a fleeting moment that struck Jane like an alarm bell. Without thinking, she stood up, feet propelled by instinct. He turned towards her, and the weight of his gaze locked them in place. There was no crowd to hide behind, no distractions that could soften the thud of their trembling hearts. His voice broke the silence, low yet earnest. "Mom, can we talk?" The words slipped from her mouth, propelled by a torrent of emotions. Reluctantly, he nodded, the space between them feeling infinite. They settled at a small table in the corner, the ambiance of clinking dishes and soft chatter creating a backdrop of normalcy that contrasted sharply with the storm inside. Jane sat stiffly, curating her thoughts, while the steam from her coffee curled around her fingers. She needed to tread carefully, aware that every word carried the weight of unspoken feelings. "Didn't you get my message?" he asked, the tone deceptively casual but laced with distress. "I did," she replied, locking eyes with him. It felt like the starting line of a race she had been preparing for without realizing. Before he could recoil, she continued, "I need you to understand that what you said, it hurt, but it also made me realize how far apart we've grown. Maybe I haven't listened enough." His expression shifted, confusion replaced by a hint of vulnerability. "I just need space, Mom. I have to figure out who I am without you deciding everything for me." "Me." Each word pierced the air gently, yet the impact felt like sharp shards of glass. Jane pressed her lips together, staving off a wave of frustration. But this was it, the very crux of her evolution. She could choose defensiveness, the knee-jerk reaction of a parent feeling attacked, or she could choose to embrace the discomfort and use it as a stepping stone. "I didn't mean to push you away. I thought I was helping." "Helping? You've set these expectations that I'm just supposed to meet." His tone rose slightly, urgency bubbling beneath the surface. "I can't be your version of who you want me to be." The tremor in his voice revealed more than just his frustration. It unveiled a yearning for identity, for independence, and the longing to be seen beyond her hopes and fears. Jane's heart twisted painfully at the realization. Was she holding on too tightly, squeezing the very life out of their bond? "I thought I was supporting your dream," she murmured, staring into her coffee. The liquid stirred, revealing swirling reflections that mirrored her confusion. But maybe I was just projecting my own. The air between them shifted, laden with newfound recognition. Jake's shoulders softened slightly, and he inhaled deeply. "I need to make choices, Mom, choices that are mine." His words resonated deeply, awakening a spark of understanding within her. In that moment, Jane felt the old chains that had bound her slip away. This wasn't the end. Their conversation was just the beginning. The dawning realization washed over her that she was capable of redefining her relationship with Jake, shedding the expectations that hung between them like unyielding fog. "Then let's work together," she suggested, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "I want to help you find your path, not prescribe it. It's time I learned to listen instead of dictate." His eyes brightened, the tension in his posture easing just a little. That would mean a lot. As the cafe's chatter faded into the background, Jane leaned forward, eager to traverse this new terrain together. But just as a soft smile began to form on her lips, a stark realization clawed at her interior. What would it take to repair the wounds inflicted by unintentional conflicts and the choices made in the name of love? The fear of past errors loomed ahead, pulsing with urgency. This was merely the first step in a long journey of rediscovery, and she knew deep down that there would be many more challenges ahead. The hardest choices were yet to come. A single thought emerged, relentless and demanding. It was time to confront the realities of her expectations, their roots buried deep in her own insecurities, ready to be unearthed. Jane left the cafe feeling as if she had stepped into a new world, one where shadows were chasing her, but the promise of light flickered at the periphery. She had navigated through a tense conversation filled with sharp words, yet part of her felt liberated. The realization that she could forge a new connection with her son invigorated her, but the shadows were not gone. They lurked, reminding her of what still needed to be addressed. At home, the familiar silence greeted her. The house felt too spacious, each room a sentinel of past conversations that echoed through the walls. It suffocated her, and yet within its stillness, Jane halted. She sensed that this was an opportunity, an invitation to dig deeper. She retrieved a journal from under her bed, one she had kept since Jake was a child, largely filled with thoughts about him, hopes, dreams, and plans. As she thumbed through the pages, she recognized the patterns of her desire to control outcomes, her fear of loss, and the relentless expectations she had built around them both. Each entry revealed an obsession with perfection, a longing for validation she had projected onto Jake. What does it mean to be a good mother? The question spiraled inside her as she put pen to page, her thoughts transforming into ink. She confronted the tough aspects of her parenting. She questioned if she had stifled Jake's growth by masking her own insecurities about failure. Did she spare him the struggle of finding himself because she feared where that journey might lead? The night wore on, and she wrote until her hand ached. The more she revealed her vulnerabilities on paper, the more clarity dawned on her. This was not just about Jake. It was about what being a mother had come to represent for Jane. The revelation was stark. Her journey of healing was intrinsically linked to understanding herself, her motivations, fears, and limitations. With each entry, she recognized that giving Jake space would require her to embrace uncertainty and rectify her own internal conflicts. There was fear wrapped tightly around her heart, a primal response to the potential of losing him. She had to face it and unearth the strength held within the vulnerability of loving another. But with this growing understanding emerged a new dilemma. Her journal was peppered with memories that represented assumptions she had not only about Jake, but about herself as well. The burden of her expectations was heavy, and she was beginning to realize it was time to share more than just her dreams for him. Jake also needed to understand her journey, the difficulties that shaped her outlook, and how the duty of motherhood had once felt like a crown too heavy to bear. It was about time she showed him that strength comes from vulnerability rather than a facade of perfection. Yet, how could she initiate this conversation without pushing him further away? Would sharing her internal struggle deepen their bond or confuse him more? Her heart raced at the thought of sharing her findings with Jake. It was imperative to broach the topic gently, to ensure he understood it was not a demand for empathy, but a bridge toward mutual understanding. As she placed the journal back under her bed, Jane realized the work was only beginning. This new chapter of their relationship would not be as simple as she'd hoped. The path ahead needed thought and sensitivity, laden with honesty. The stakes had never felt higher. Her thoughts skittered towards the next challenge. What if she opened up with raw honesty and he recoiled? Determined to avoid assumptions in their next conversation, she resolved to approach Jake with transparency, offering him her reflections for consideration rather than as declarations. That was the way forward. Uncertainty tangled with courage. As the darkness outside thickened, Jane felt the air shift around her. There was no going back. The only way was forward, through the fog of past expectations and into the light of mutual discovery. But she had to confront the lingering question, one that haunted her like a chill. Would courage be enough to mend what had frayed between them? She took a deep breath, ready to face the shadows that would continue to chase her until she confronted them directly. Every step would test her resolve, but she felt a fire of determination ignite within. Little did she know, the hourglass had already begun to empty. Time was slipping away, and the next conversation with Jake loomed on the horizon. An intersection where vulnerability and fear would collide in ways she never anticipated. Would she rise to meet the moment, or would the weight of her past pull her under again? The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing lazily in the air. Jane stood at the counter, tense fingers gripping a mug of coffee that had long cooled. Morning light usually brought warmth, but today it felt piercing, highlighting the edges of her turmoil. As she took a tentative sip, its bitter taste mirrored the anxiety curling in her gut. Today was the day. The perfect moment she had envisioned, an intimate breakfast where she could open up to Jake about her struggle. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, uncertainty clawed at her resolve. She replayed her strategy in her mind. Approach him gently, share her reflections from the journal, offer him her vulnerabilities. But could she bare her soul without overwhelming him? In a moment of distraction, the sound of Jake's footsteps echoed from the hallway. The route between them felt like a chasm, but she knew this was her chance to bridge it. When he settled at the table, Jane realized how vital her approach was. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a test of everything she had learned about herself, the fear, the courage, the acceptance, and how it integrated into their relationship. "Hey, Mom," Jake said, his voice casual but his eyes guarded. "Hey, Jake," she replied, attempting to keep her tone light. "I was thinking we could talk a bit, just the two of us?" His brow furrowed slightly, and she sensed him retreating inward. Sure, about what? A world of thoughts rushed through her mind, but instead of overwhelming him, she chose, "I've been reflecting on our last conversation. It struck me how much I've focused on being what I thought was a good mother, and not necessarily the best person I could be for you." Jake's gaze shifted to the floor, and she felt the weight of his silence looming. Was she losing him again? "I know it's been difficult between us, and a lot of that is my fault." The words spilled from her like a dam bursting. "I've carried expectations, fears, and they've influenced how I reacted to you, maybe too much. I realize I need to let go of the idea of control and let you carve your own path." He looked up, surprise flashing across his face. For a moment, the walls around him seemed to soften. "Mom, it's not just you." Disappointment and relief warred within her. "What do you mean?" "I felt trapped too. You're not the only one figuring things out." His honesty was a twist of the knife, but also a source of clarity. Jane took a deep breath, her chest tighter than before. "I want you to know I'm here to listen, not just to lecture or guide you, just to be your mom, to walk beside you, even when things get complicated." The message hung in the air, weighty yet translucent. She peered into her son's eyes, searching for a sign of understanding. "I get that," Jake responded, his voice steadier. "I just never feel like you really understand what I'm going through. I feel like I'm always under a microscope." This was it, the painful moment of connection that could either fracture or heal. "I know," she admitted, feeling a softening in her heart. "I've put so much pressure on both of us to succeed that I've lost sight of what really matters. Our relationship, the real stuff. I don't want to suffocate you anymore, but I also need you to tell me when I'm doing it." Jake stared at her for a long moment, and she could see his thoughts churning like wheels turning in deep water. He was processing, and she held her breath, aware that each second stretched into eternity. "I'll try," he finally said, "but you have to promise to keep working on yourself. You might think you're fine, but I need you to be honest with me." His words were searing, cutting straight to the heart of their issues. She nodded. "I promise, Jake. I'm committed to doing the work for both of us." As they settled into a quieter space, the conversation shifted. They began to share more, not just grievances, but hopes, fears, and dreams, carving away at the history that had weighed them down. Yet even as Jane felt the heaviness begin to lift, unease crept in. It was clear this wasn't the end of their challenges, but merely the beginning of a new chapter. They had opened the door to dialogue, but would they have the strength? Would her newfound honesty guide them, or expose cracks she had tried to conceal? As time unfolded that morning, Jane realized the hardest work lay ahead. Facing the echoes of her past and the commitment to navigate the uncharted territory of their relationship made her heart race. What if, with every step toward healing, they uncovered deeper issues lurking beneath the surface? The thought chilled her, yet it was a flickering ember of hope that ignited her courage. The shadows hadn't vanished, they had simply grown longer. The true test loomed ahead. Would they emerge stronger together, or would the fractures widen into irreparable divides? Jane sensed a shift in the atmosphere around them. The warmth from the sunlight had transformed into an almost sterile glow, a background to the reality they had just begun to confront. The conversation with Jake was a moment of truth, but it also left her standing at a crossroads. She could choose to retreat into familiar patterns or forge ahead into the unknown territory of empathy and understanding. After breakfast, Jake excused himself, leaving Jane alone with a whirlwind of thoughts. The house felt eerily quiet, the silence amplifying her uncertainties. She grabbed her journal, her ally in times of confusion, and settled on the couch, the pages waiting for her words to carve out a path through her turmoil. As she wrote, she forced herself to recall the promises she had made, to be more present, to dismantle her tightly held expectations, and to embrace vulnerability in her interactions with Jake. Each reflection brought her closer to revelations she had previously evaded. She wrote about the moments she had let her fears drown out Jake's voice. She discovered that the need for control stemmed from her desire to shield him from potential pain. Ironically, it had only served to deepen their disconnection. The jagged edges of her parenting instincts confronted the desire to genuinely support Jake as he navigated his own life choices. With one entry flowing into another, Jane began identifying strengths she had overlooked. In her vulnerability, she acknowledged her capacity for growth. The realization that making mistakes did not equate to failure was liberating. Each flaw she had identified was an opportunity for transformation. Writing it down birthed a plan. They would tackle their relationship challenges together, one step at a time, allowing space for trial and error. Later that day, a message buzzed from Jake's phone, a notification of an incoming text. Cautiously, she approached it, weighing whether to intrude on his privacy. Instead of reading, she decided it was time for another conversation, one that could perhaps deepen their understanding of each other. As she reached for her phone to propose a time to talk later, uncertainty crept in. What if Jake wasn't ready to share more? What if he pulled back again? Anxiety pricked at her skin. But alongside that anxiety was a stirring of determination. To truly embrace her commitment to change, she had to create the space for dialogue, regardless of the outcome. Texting Jake, she felt a rush of empowerment. "Hey, can we talk this evening? I want to hear more about what you've been feeling." After a moment that felt like an eternity, the reply came. "Yeah, we can. I'll be home around 6. Jane's heart raced, not only at the content of the message, but also at her willingness to put herself out there again. Once merely a defensive reaction was transforming into an active choice to foster openness and trust. As the hour approached, Jane busied herself with preparing dinner, feeling the weight of anticipation settle in her chest. Each stir of the pot was a reminder of the progress they had made, yet also an acknowledgement of the hurdles that loomed ahead. About halfway through, she paused to look outside. The shadows were lengthening across the yard, realigning in ways that reflected her own shifting mental landscapes. Would openness lead to healing, or would hidden wounds surface again? What weighty truths lay ahead in their next conversation? With the uncertainty of the forthcoming discussion tugging at her thoughts, Jane felt an invigorating mix of fear and courage embrace her. Today's earlier dialogues were only the beginning, unearthing layers of complexity within herself and her relationship with Jake. But as evening settled in, she found that the responsibility of maintaining this newfound commitment pressed heavily upon her. The stakes had risen, and so had Jane's desire to nurture a bond with her son that could endure the difficult truths yet to be uncovered. In that moment, she understood. The real journey was just beginning, and the next step forward might require taking a hard look at unresolved tensions that still festered between them. She couldn't turn back now. The stakes were too high, and she was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The clock ticked steadily, reminding Jane of the impending conversation with Jake. The weight of her intentions filled the room almost tangibly, creating a tension that draped over her like a heavy blanket. Each minute felt elongated, pulling her through a spiral of thoughts about their previous discussions and the wounds that festered beneath the surface. Would they be able to tackle the truths waiting to be unveiled? As she sliced vegetables, the sharp knife edge mirrored her anxious thoughts. She was trying to cut through the layers of fear she once relied upon for protection. The journey toward honesty was daunting. It was so easy to slip back into silence, to choose the comfort of unspoken words over the uncomfortable reality of vulnerability. With every chop, she recalled the times she had veered away from confrontation, letting misunderstandings slide, allowing the silence to grow. Tonight, she vowed, there would be no avoidance. It was time to confront her fears head-on. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. What had started as a yearning for ease and control had morphed into a determination to foster deep connection. Now she had to discover the art of listening, not just to Jake's words, but to the feelings hidden within them. When Jake finally walked through the door, she was taken aback by the flurry of mixed emotions flickering across his face. He looked weary yet resolute. Seeing him stirred a protective instinct within her, one she was learning to navigate without smothering his independence. "Hey, I've got dinner almost ready," she said, forcing a calmness in her voice. "Great." Jake attempted a smile, but it faltered. They both knew this dinner would be more than just about food. It was a step into uncharted territory for both of them. As they settled at the table, Jane could feel the charged atmosphere. Tension hung like an unfinished sentence, and she knew they had to begin somewhere. "I wanted to say I appreciate you agreeing to talk tonight, Jake," she started, her voice slightly shaking. "I know things haven't been easy between us lately, and I'm committed to understanding what's been happening." Jake glanced up, his eyes revealing a depth of emotion that both intrigued and frightened her. "Yeah, I've been thinking a lot too." He hesitated, searching for the right words. I don't want to keep feeling like we're just drifting." Jane acknowledged the uncomfortable truth in his words. Drifting had been their method of coping. "I feel the same way. I think I've tried too hard to control things, to protect us both from pain, but it's only pushed us apart." As she spoke, a sense of clarity blossomed within her. This was her chance to dismantle the walls that had formed over time. Jake's gaze softened slightly. "I get that, Mom. It's just hard for me to open up. I'm afraid of how much it'll hurt, or if you'll really understand." The fear reflected in his eyes resonated with her own. This shared vulnerability sparked an instinctual shift within her. "I want to understand, Jake. Whatever it is, it's okay. You're safe to tell me." As they continued that conversation, Jane felt a growing sense of purpose alongside the trepidation that seeped into her bones. Each new piece of information revealed a delicate tapestry of hurt and misunderstanding, inviting her to face what she had long avoided. Jake laid bare his frustrations and fears, while she sought to absorb them with an open heart, fortified by her new resolve. They peeled back layers of love and disappointment, confusion and hope. In the potent silence that followed each expression, Jane realized that the real breakthrough lay in their willingness to be uncomfortable together. Uncharted depths unfolded, revealing her ability to relate deeply rather than resist. That evening, with the anxious weight lifted just slightly, Jane reflected on the power of vulnerability. Yet she knew that they were still at the threshold of greater revelations. Would they come closer through the truths they unearthed, or would the unspoken past continue to haunt them? Moments later, Jake glanced at her, and Jane felt the gravity of the unasked questions hovering between them. What fragile truths had yet to be revealed? The space between them crackled with both exhilaration and uncertainty, and she knew that their journey was far from over. They had broken ground, but some of the hardest conversations were still ahead, and Jane realized she had to prepare herself for the emotional onslaught that might follow. The simmering tension of the evening had barely begun to settle when Jake's voice cut through the lingering silence once more. "Mom, can I be honest about something else?" The gravity of his request sent a shiver down Jane's spine. She could sense that another layer of their dynamics was about to unfold. "Of course, Jake, you can tell me anything." The reassurance slipped out, yet her heart raced with apprehension. He needed to understand that their relationship was built on trust, but vulnerability still felt like walking a tightrope, precariously balanced above the abyss of unresolved issues. "Sometimes I feel like I can't really be myself around you. Like I have to put on a mask to make things easier," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. Painful clarity echoed in his words, spilling out emotions she had long buried. Jane's stomach twisted, realizing they were crossing into deeper waters than she'd anticipated. "Why do you feel that way?" Her question was laced with urgency. She needed to understand, to foster an environment of openness. Jake hesitated, weighing his words as if they were fragile glass. "I guess I don't want to add to your stress. You've done so much for me, and I don't want to be a burden." The vulnerability was palpable, punctuating the air between them. Jane cringed at the inadvertent burden her unreachable attempts at control had placed on him. "You're not a burden, Jake. I'm your mom. My job is to support you. Please, let me in. What do you need from me?" "I just wish you could see me for who I really am," he said, his gaze piercing through her defenses. It was a plea that stung with raw honesty. She knew it was time to confront her own shortcomings in this mother-son relationship, to peel away her protective layers as much as she expected Jake to peel away his. In that overhead moment, Jane committed to redefining her approach. She was tired of silencing her own fears and fortifying barriers instead of nurturing mutual growth. "I promise to do better, Jake. I want to be the kind of mom who you can come to as you are, no pretenses." A flicker of hope ignited in Jake's eyes, but the journey ahead felt daunting. Would they truly make it to the other side, equipped with a renewed understanding? As they exchanged stories and navigated deeper feelings, Jane envisioned practical steps that could lead to lasting change in their communication. She needed to embrace the role of active listener, asking questions not just for the sake of completion, of getting answers, but to foster a safe space where Jake's authentic self could unravel without fear. But inside her, anxiety gnawed at the quiet knowledge of her past failures. What if she stumbled again? What if old patterns resurfaced, pushing them into more silence instead of understanding? The pressures of her upbringing often loomed large, threatening to suffocate her efforts. "Can we schedule a weekly check-in?" The suggestion slipped from her lips spontaneously. Just to make sure we're both on the same page, a time for both of us to be completely honest? Jake nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, that might help. I like that idea. As they drew up plans for their open dialogue, Jane felt a shift within her, a determination to step outside her comfort zone and embrace the awkwardness of being open and vulnerable. The potential for growth lay just ahead, but so did the inevitable setbacks she feared. She sensed Jake's relief, but that only amplified her resolve. I'll keep working on sharing my own feelings too, Jake. I need to show you that you're not alone in this. But an unsettling thought lingered. Would her admission of vulnerabilities lead to new levels of resilience between them? Or would old wounds somehow manifest anew? As the evening wound down, they sat in comfortable silence, both aware that deeper truth still loomed on the horizon. With a newfound sense of hope glimmering between them, Jane made a silent vow to confront whatever hurdles lay ahead. The space felt charged, electric with the promise of growth, but often the hardest chapters lay ahead. Would the future conversations bring them even closer, or would they feel the recoil of exposing their vulnerabilities? Ignoring the tightening knot in her stomach, Jane tensed for what was to come, leaning into the emerging dynamic that promised connection and challenge in equal measure. One thing was certain, the road to understanding wouldn't be free of obstacles. The moment of truth was near. What would they uncover when they delved deeper into the fears that held them captive? The week that followed their pivotal conversation was fraught with a strange blend of anticipation and anxiety. Each day felt like a careful calibration of emotions, where Jane battled to balance her determination for change with the creeping dread of failure. The weekly check-in had become a lifeline, yet it loomed over her like a storm cloud ready to burst. She spent hours pondering what it meant to be open, to strip away the pretense that had defined her parenting for so long. Each night she would lie awake, replaying what Jake had said. "I just wish you could see me for who I really am." The phrase echoed in her mind, a relentless reminder of her own shortcomings and the protective walls she had built, often at the expense of their connection. On the morning of their first check-in, Jane felt a familiar concentration of nerves knotting her stomach. After dropping Jake off at school, she drove aimlessly for a little while, grappling with her resolve. The trees lining the road shimmered in the sunlight. Nature held beauty, but she couldn't shake the dread that swirled within her. What if Jake's desire for space had merely been the tip of the iceberg? She had to confront not only her fears, but also the 11 years of her motherhood that had culminated in this moment. When she got home, Jane paced the living room, collecting her thoughts. She needed a framework for their conversation, a way to ground whatever feelings surfaced. Perhaps they could explore specific topics, starting with simple ones, gradually building to vulnerability. She grabbed a notebook and jotted down key points. What do we want from these check-ins? And how can I show you I'm listening without jumping in to fix? That evening, she prepared a light dinner, a gesture towards establishing a comforting atmosphere. As the hour of their conversation approached, her resolve solidified. Uncertainty niggled at her like the edges of an unfinished quilt, but she felt capable of sewing those pieces together, one stitch at a time. She would offer him a space of genuine openness, hoping he'd reciprocate. When Jake arrived home, the tension in the air was tangible. He had a slight frown etched on his face, as if he carried the weight of unspoken worries. "Hey, Mom," he said, dropping his backpack by the door. "You ready for our chat?" "Absolutely," she replied, forcing a smile. They settled at the kitchen table, and Jane gestured for him to start. Jake took a deep breath. "So, I guess I wanted to talk about expectations, at school, with friends, everything." His voice was steady, but she could detect the uncertainty beneath. Jane nodded, prompting him with a simple, "What's been on your mind?" "I just feel like I'm trying to juggle so much, and I don't know if it's what you want from me." He shifted slightly in his chair, vulnerability bleeding through his bravado. "I mean, I love soccer, but the pressure to get good grades and plan for college, sometimes it feels like too much." Her heart sank. The relationship he'd spoken of so candidly was muddied with expectations she hadn't realized were suffocating him. "What do you think I expect from you?" she asked, sensing the importance of their first conversation bubbling under the surface. He shrugged, frustration flickering in his eyes. "I think you want me to be successful, and I want to do well, but it feels like I can't mess up, not with anything." The honesty raked at Jane's chest. "I didn't realize I was putting that pressure on you. I'm so sorry, Jake." As she spoke, a realization dawned. Her protective instincts had given way to unrealistic expectations. Their dialogue shifted into deeper territory, fraught with revelations that lay bare insecurities she had assumed they could keep hidden. Would this unveiling expose more wounds or forge a connection that withstood the scrutiny? Jake's face softened. "I think I just want to be less afraid of disappointing you." Jane wrestled with the ache in her heart, enveloped by a mix of anger and empathy. Anger at her past self for cultivating such an environment. Empathy for her son who had fought to keep the peace. "You don't have to be perfect. I need to learn to celebrate you and not just the achievements on paper." A profound silence fell between them as they absorbed the intensity of their discussion. It wasn't an easy chapter, but it felt like a leap toward authenticity, a risky yet necessary step in crafting their new dynamic. As they concluded their check-in, Jane felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps they could navigate these complexities together, but challenging conversations always reemerged. Later that night, the uncertainty crept back in. What barriers still prevented them from truly connecting? Were they merely skimming the surface of deeper fears? As Jane contemplated their progress, she recognized that the real work lay ahead, waiting for their next honest exchange. Before drifting off to sleep, an unsettling question filled her mind. What happens when the discussion turns to the feelings they've both avoided for so long? The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Jane stirred from an interrupted sleep, her mind swirling with doubts. Shifting from the realm of dreams into the reality of impending discussions with Jake felt like a crossing over, fraught with the anxieties of what still lay unsaid. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the familiar ritual grounding her for the challenging conversations she needed to face that day. Sitting at the table, she gazed at the notepad from their last check-in, the bulleted questions seeming to leap off the page. Each word danced before her, demanding attention. What was she afraid of uncovering? What hidden truths would her son reveal? And more importantly, what fragments of her own past would resurface under the scrutiny of an honest exchange? Jane realized that part of her exploration would involve diving into her own fears, her fears of failure as a mother, her fears of rejection, and ultimately the fear of losing the connection she had desperately tried to foster with her son. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for a new layer of vulnerability. "It's time to confront this," she whispered softly, a vow to herself. As she drove to pick Jake up from school, the hum of the engine mirrored her rising heartbeat. She continued to rehearse the framework of their next conversation. Meeting Jake on a level where both of them could voice the struggles and pains without the fear of judgment was essential. But what if he was unprepared for such raw honesty? Would he close off again as he had in the past? Arriving at the school, Jane leaned against the car, watching other parents and children shuffle toward their vehicles, the mundane rhythm of life stark against the tumultuous thoughts flooding her mind. She carried an inner dialogue that ran deeper than the observational. Did she have the courage to model vulnerability herself before asking Jake to lay bare his heart? When Jake emerged from school, the usual schoolyard demeanor cloaked in teenage nonchalance evaporated as he approached the car. Jane noticed a shadow of unease flickering across his features. "Hey, Mom," he greeted, but his eyes darted away as if seeking escape from the weight of unspoken issues. "Hey, Jake, want to grab a snack and talk? I thought we could stop by Joe's Deli," she suggested, trying to inject some normalcy into their interaction. "Sure," he replied, his voice tinged with resignation. As they settled into a booth, Jane's fingers twisted nervously on the menu. Every instinct screamed at her to fill the void with banter, yet she knew silence might spur the honesty they both needed. Breaking the ice, Jane began, "You know, I've been thinking about our last conversation, especially about expectations. And I want you to feel like you can talk about everything, what you truly want, how I can be there for you." As she spoke, a part of her remained on guard, waiting for his defenses to rise. Jake's gaze dropped, and after a moment of hesitation, he whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm just not enough, at school and even at home." Her chest tightened, the words echoing in her mind. This was the crux of it, the very thing she feared he felt. "What do you mean by that?" she probed gently. "Like, no matter what I do, it never really meets your expectations, or at least that's how it feels," he admitted, his voice cracking. Jane's heart ached at the revelation. "And I want to know why you feel that way, Jake. It's important to me that you feel loved and understood for just being you." Her own eyes glistened with unshed tears, recognizing that they were both tangled in their misconceptions as much as in their desires. As they sat in that small deli, the world around them faded into insignificance. This moment was pivotal, yet it was just the beginning. The floodgates of feeling stood at the brink, vulnerable, ready to unleash both pain and clarity in waves. They both needed to provide the space for one another to unfold, requiring a commitment neither of them had fully realized was necessary. Finally, she declared, "Let's tackle this together. We both deserve to be free from these fears." It was a promise not just to Jake, but to herself, too. Yet just as the moment seemed hopeful, a thought slashed through her. What if questioning their perspectives unveiled something darker? What hidden grievances would resurface as they peeled back the layers of their experiences? Would the conversation bring forth healing or plunge them into deeper confusion? Jane's resolve hardened with every beat, riding the bifurcating wave of anticipation and trepidation. As their discussion turned towards the unspoken, Jane felt it, and these cascading revelations had the potential to uproot far more than she had prepared for. What did it mean to truly understand each other? Did she dare to hope it would lead to transformation, or only reveal more cracks in their already fragile foundation? Weeks passed, and Jane stood at a precipice she had never envisioned. The whirlwind of emotions from the last few conversations with Jake had catalyzed changes within her that unfolded like the petals of a blossoming flower. Each weekly check-in confirmed their commitment to honesty and vulnerability, solidifying a connection that had long been overshadowed by unexpressed fears and expectations. Today, she resolved to confront not just Jake's expectations, but her own once and for all. As she prepared for their next dialogue, she reflected on the crescendo of moments augmented by mutual realizations. The laughter, the tears, and the unearthed truths intertwined, revealing a pathway that was finally illuminated. When Jake entered the living room after school that afternoon, he immediately caught a glimpse of the journal she had been scribbling notes in throughout the week, her reflections, ambitions, hopes, and lessons learned. "What's that?" he asked, a hesitant curiosity sparking in his eyes. "This," she began, her voice gaining confidence, "is my way of sorting through everything. I've been writing about our conversations, how they've changed me. It's become a crucial part of my journey toward being a better mom." His eyebrows lifted slightly, and he settled onto the couch across from her. "So what have you learned?" "First, I've learned that I've projected my own insecurities onto you," she replied, knowing she needed to be authentic. "My fear of failure, my desire for control, those things created unnecessary pressure. I've realized my expectations, intended to help, may have done more harm than good." As she spoke, she felt shackles fall away, exposing the beautiful mess of her motherly love. A truth sang in her words, echoing loud and clear. Love isn't about wanting perfection, it's about honoring individuality. Jake leaned forward, genuine intrigue replacing his previous guardedness. "It's cool that you want to improve, Mom, but what helps you realize all this?" Jane paused, a myriad of emotions washing over her. "It was when you said you felt like you had to be someone you're not around me. I was devastated to hear it. I never wanted you to feel anything other than accepted for who you are. That's what it means to truly be a mother, to provide unconditional support." A flicker of recognition crossed his face, as if the curtain had been lifted, revealing a fresh perspective. "Do you ever think we could write together?" he offered, a slight grin breaking through the weight of their previous topics. "Like, you show me your journal and I can share mine. It's a way we can both be honest with each other." Her heart swelled with pride at his willingness to engage in shared vulnerability. "That's a brilliant idea, Jake. I'd love that." That moment, something significant crystallized between them. It was the shared weight of their struggles and the budding commitment to honor each other's growth journeys. A shift had cemented their relationship. The walls that once partitioned them dissipated into a newfound space of openness that promised lasting transformation. As they explored her journal together, laughter and creativity ebbed and flowed through their discussion, mingling with heartfelt seriousness. Jake shared his musings, his dreams and fears, revealing the layers of complexity he held within. They both felt lighter, invigorated by their growing connection. This wasn't a transactional relationship anymore, but a partnership built on mutual understanding and support. Days turned into weeks, and each new discussion often branched out, revealing deep-rooted frustrations and realigning aspirations. Jane's emotional investment deepened as she embraced her authentic vulnerabilities and expressed gratitude toward Jake for his capacity to share openly. Understanding flowed seamlessly between them, and through this process of exploration, Jane discovered an unexpected thrill from learning more about herself while encouraging Jake to voice his truth. During one particular conversation, Jake expressed how seeing her evolve not only inspired him to embrace his individuality, but filled the void of fear he had felt. "This is what I need, Mom, a real relationship where we can both be honest," he said earnestly. A profound sense of fulfillment enveloped Jane, embracing her like a vibrant tapestry woven from her resolve, love, and resilience. At the culmination of their journey together, Jake received an art scholarship that showcased his burgeoning talent. Watching him achieve success filled Jane with immense pride. The culmination of their shared commitment was a palpable achievement, one garnered from embracing the nuances of their renewed relationship. As she stood by his side at the award ceremony, the love between them radiated with authenticity, illuminating their previous struggles as mere stepping stones toward profound connection. As the proud mother of a talented artist becoming his genuine self, Jane felt a solid confidence welling within her. She had not only conquered her fears, but emerged as a model of resilience for her son. Both had demonstrated tremendous growth in ways neither had ever envisioned. Reflecting back on her journey, Jane marveled at how far they had come. A simple text had ignited a powerful exploration of healing, one that transformed their relationship beyond recognition. Regained strengths and newfound perspectives filled her not only with satisfaction, but with a deep-seated belief in the strength of vulnerability. As the applause warmed her heart and pride percolated through every fiber of her being, the artistic endeavors of her son were now intertwined with her own personal journey. This was the moment she had worked towards, the tangible proof that transformation was possible. Even now, sitting with this hard-won recognition, Jane looked back at their journey with gratitude. How much more they had learned together, how deep and vital their connection had become. This was triumph, resilience, and healing, a lifetime of narratives illuminated by the journey toward authentic relationships, committed to facing the complexities of love and truth, one conversation at a time. In the heart of this truth, an urgent message emerged. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see these remarkable transformations. This is the moment to show your support.